"We won't make it to your housewarming. Your sister needs some groceries," the text from my mom read. I stared at my phone screen for what felt like an eternity, watching the words blur as a familiar ache settled deep in my chest. For a moment, I considered typing out everything I wanted to say. All the years of disappointment and neglect condensed into one explosive message that would finally make them understand. Instead, I simply replied, "All good," and set my phone face down on the granite countertop of my brand new kitchen. My name is Grace, and I am 31 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, where the Blue Ridge Mountains rise like ancient sentinels against the sky, and the air carries the perpetual scent of pine and endless possibility. I grew up in a small town about 4 hours east of here, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and gossip traveled faster than wildfire through dry brush. I was the firstborn daughter in my family, which in most households would mean something significant. In mine, it meant I was merely the practice run before my parents got the child they actually wanted. My sister Brooke came along 3 years after me, and from the moment she drew her first breath in that hospital room, I became invisible. I do not say this with bitterness anymore, just the quiet resignation of someone who has spent 3 decades accepting a fundamental truth about her place in the world. Brooke was beautiful in a way I never managed to be, with delicate features and a porcelain complexion that made strangers stop my mother on the street just to comment on her gorgeous baby. I was plain, bookish, and entirely too serious for a young child. While Brooke charmed her way through every room she entered, I buried myself in books. While she collected friends and admirers like seashells on a beach, I collected scholarships and academic awards that nobody in my family bothered to acknowledge. The housewarming party was supposed to happen that very evening, and I had invited my parents a full 3 weeks in advance, giving them plenty of time to arrange their schedules. I had sent them the address with detailed driving directions, offered to pay for their gas money, even suggested they stay overnight in one of the guest bedrooms, so they would not have to make the drive back in the dark. My mother had said she would think about it, her voice carrying that distracted tone I had grown so accustomed to hearing whenever I asked for anything. My father had not responded to my invitation at all, which was typical of his complete disengagement from my life. And now, 6 hours before guests were scheduled to arrive at my home, I received this text message. Brooke needed groceries. My 28-year-old sister, who still lived at home with our parents, who had never held a job longer than 3 months, who could not seem to function without their constant intervention, needed groceries. And somehow, that mundane errand trumped my celebration of purchasing my first home. I walked slowly through my house, running my fingers along the cool granite countertops and the custom woodwork that I had spent months carefully selecting with my architect. The house sat on 12 acres of pristine mountain property, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a valley so breathtakingly beautiful it made my heart ache every single morning when I woke up and remembered it was mine. I had worked relentlessly for this moment. 15 years of grinding through entry-level positions, saving every penny I could manage, building a career in real estate development that had exceeded every modest expectation I had ever allowed myself to hold. This house was worth $4.5 million, and I had paid for it entirely in cash. But my parents did not know any of that. They did not know because they had never once asked about my life in any meaningful way. In their minds, I was still the quiet daughter who had left home at 18 and rarely bothered to come back for visits. They assumed I lived in some modest apartment somewhere, doing whatever it was I did for work. Real estate they vaguely understood when forced to explain my career to curious relatives. Something with houses, they would say dismissively. They had never visited my office, never met my colleagues or business partners, never shown the slightest genuine interest in the empire I was methodically building, while they poured every single ounce of their attention and resources into Brooke. The HGTV production crew had arrived 3 days earlier to begin filming. The network was producing a special feature on luxury mountain homes in the southeast, and my property had been selected as one of 3 magnificent estates to be showcased. I had debated internally for weeks about telling my parents about the upcoming episode, imagining their shocked faces when they finally realized the true scope of what their overlooked daughter had accomplished entirely on her own. But something deep inside held me back from sharing this news. Maybe it was stubborn pride that refused to beg for their attention anymore. Maybe it was hard-earned self-preservation after decades of disappointment. Or maybe I simply knew with bone-deep certainty that even this remarkable achievement would not be enough to shift their attention away from their precious Brooke for more than a fleeting moment. My best friend Megan arrived an hour before the party was scheduled to begin, her arms overflowing with gorgeous flower arrangements and her face full of barely concealed concern. We had met during our freshman year of college, two fiercely ambitious women who refused to let anything or anyone stand in the way of our dreams. She was now an incredibly successful architect with her own thriving firm, and she had actually helped me design some of the custom architectural elements in this very home. Megan knew my complicated family situation better than anyone else in my life, having witnessed countless disappointments over our 13-year friendship, and when I silently showed her the dismissive text message from my mother, she shook her head slowly with the bone-deep weariness of someone who had heard this exact story far too many times before. "They are not coming," she said flatly. It was not a question requiring an answer. "Brooke needs groceries," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. Megan set down the elaborate flower arrangements on my kitchen island and pulled me into a tight, fierce hug that communicated everything words could not express. "They're tremendous loss, Grace. Just look at this incredible place. Look at everything you have built completely on your own. If they cannot see your worth after all these years, that is entirely a reflection of their own limitations, not yours." I nodded against her shoulder, swallowing hard against the stubborn lump forming in my throat. She was absolutely right, of course. Megan was always right about these things, with her clear-eyed perspective unclouded by the desperate need for parental approval that still plagued me despite my best efforts. But knowing something intellectually and actually feeling it emotionally are two entirely different experiences. Part of me, that wounded little girl who still lived somewhere deep inside my adult heart, still craved their approval with embarrassing intensity, still wanted desperately to be the daughter they celebrated and bragged about, instead of the one they perpetually forgot existed. As I watched through my windows, the afternoon light began its slow golden transformation into evening, and I knew the party would begin soon without them. I grew up in a house where love was rationed like precious wartime supplies, and Brooke always received the larger portion without question. I genuinely do not remember a single birthday celebration where she did not find some way to make my special day about herself instead. When I turned 16, she threw an elaborate tantrum because she wanted the exact same chocolate cake I had specifically requested, even though her own birthday was still 3 whole months away. My parents gave in to her demands immediately, of course, purchasing 2 identical cakes and somehow transforming my milestone birthday celebration into a joint event that she dominated completely. When I graduated high school as class valedictorian with a full academic scholarship to a prestigious university, Brooke complained loudly and persistently about having to attend the boring ceremony. We left my graduation early, before I could even take photographs with my teachers and friends, so she could make it to some friend's pool party she considered far more important. College became my desperately needed escape from that suffocating dynamic. I deliberately chose a university 6 hours away from home, far enough that visits would be logistically difficult for everyone involved to arrange. I worked 3 separate part-time jobs simultaneously to cover all the expenses my generous scholarships did not fully touch, stubbornly refusing to ask my parents for any financial help, because I instinctively knew that asking would mean owing them something. And owing them anything at all would keep me permanently tethered to a family dynamic that was slowly but surely suffocating every bit of joy and self-worth out of me. I majored in business with a specialized concentration in real estate development, drawn inexplicably to the tangible nature of property and land, the satisfying way you could transform something neglected and forgotten into something genuinely valuable and beautiful. My first professional job out of college was with a small real estate development firm in Charlotte. I was the youngest person on the entire team by nearly a decade, and the only woman in any leadership position, which meant I had to work twice as hard as my male colleagues to earn even half their respect and recognition. I did not mind the extra effort in the slightest. Hard work was comfortable, familiar territory for someone who had spent her entire childhood trying to earn love that was freely given to her sister. Within 2 years at that firm, I had closed more profitable deals than anyone else in the company's history. Within 5 years, I was running my own specialized division with a team of 8 people reporting directly to me. By the time I turned 30, I had launched my own independent firm specializing in luxury mountain properties, transforming abandoned estates and overlooked land parcels into multi-million-dollar dream homes that attracted wealthy buyers from across the entire country. During all of this remarkable professional growth, my parents remained completely focused on Brooke and her endless series of small crises. She had bounced aimlessly from job to job after barely managing to graduate high school with the minimum acceptable grades, each new position lasting only a few months before she either quit in dramatic fashion or got herself fired for poor performance. She had a revolving door of boyfriends whom my parents supported financially, and then consoled her over when the relationships inevitably crashed and burned. She had moved back into our parents' house at 23 years old and never left again, perpetually claiming she was still figuring things out while my parents paid for absolutely everything she needed or wanted. The contrast between our two lives could not have been more stark, yet somehow I was always the one who fell short in their critical eyes. When I bought my first house at 26 years old, a modest fixer-upper that I personally renovated over the course of an entire year, my mother's only comment was that she hoped I was not neglecting my personal life and relationships for work. When I won a prestigious regional business award at 28, my father completely forgot to return my excited phone call telling him about the recognition. When I closed my first $10 million development deal at 30, they were too consumed with helping Brooke navigate through yet another devastating breakup to attend the small celebration dinner I had planned weeks in advance. I learned through painful repetition to stop sharing my professional successes with them at all. It simply hurt less than sharing exciting news and being met with crushing indifference or immediate subject changes back to Brooke's problems. I built a rich, fulfilling life, absolutely full of people who did genuinely celebrate my achievements without reservation. Colleagues who deeply respected my work ethic and business acumen. Friends who showed up reliably when it truly mattered most. Megan became the sister I never actually had in Brooke. Fiercely loyal and genuinely proud of absolutely everything I accomplished. But there was still that hollow, aching place inside my chest. The sacred space where unconditional parental love should have lived and flourished, that remained painfully empty no matter how much professional success I accumulated. The night before the housewarming party, I had called my mother one final time to confirm they were definitely planning to attend. She had been clearly distracted throughout our brief conversation, only half listening to my words while Brooke complained loudly and petulantly in the background about something trivial and unimportant. "We will try our very best to make it, Grace," my mother had said with that non-committal tone I knew all too well. "It is only a 3-hour drive. You could easily stay overnight in one of my guest rooms. We will see how things go. Your sister Brooke has not been feeling particularly well lately." At 28 years old, Brooke not feeling well was apparently still sufficient reason to derail any family plans that did not center entirely around her needs and wants. I should have recognized then, from that single dismissive conversation, that they were never going to come to my celebration. The text message the next morning was merely official confirmation of what I had already understood deep in my bones. My parents would always choose Brooke over me without hesitation. They would choose her laziness over my milestone achievements, her grocery needs over my celebration, her comfort over my happiness. It was the established pattern of my entire 31 years of life, and I had been foolish to think this particular occasion would somehow be any different. What my parents did not know, what I had very deliberately kept from them, was that my modest little housewarming party was about to become extremely public. The HGTV episode featuring my estate was scheduled to air that very same evening, broadcast right as my guests would be gathered together in my great room watching the premiere on my massive screen. The network had promoted the luxury homes special quite heavily across all their platforms for weeks, and anticipation among their devoted viewers was running high. My various social media accounts had already been tagged in numerous pre-show promotional posts from the network and design enthusiasts, though I had kept my own personal feeds notably quiet and mysterious. I had made the conscious decision not to tell my parents about the television feature for the exact same reason I had stopped telling them about anything professionally important in my life. Their inevitable reaction, or more likely their complete lack of meaningful reaction, would only cause me unnecessary pain. But as I received that dismissive text message about Brooke's grocery needs, something fundamental shifted inside my chest. For the first time in my entire life, I did not feel the familiar sting of hurt and rejection. I felt something entirely new, something much closer to calm anticipation. They had freely chosen to miss this moment, just like they had freely chosen to miss every other significant moment that had ever mattered to me. But this particular time would be different. This time, they would not be able to simply ignore the overwhelming evidence of my success. This time, the entire world would see exactly what they had stubbornly refused to acknowledge for 3 decades. And I had decided I was going to let them discover all of it completely on their own terms, without any warning from me. The party unfolded exactly as I had meticulously planned, with one notable absence that nobody except Megan noticed or thought to question. My 50 guests mingled happily beneath the soaring cathedral ceilings, sipping expensive champagne and admiring the spectacular panoramic views through my wall of windows. The HGTV production crew finished capturing their final establishing shots and carefully packed up all their professional equipment, promising me repeatedly that the finished episode would be absolutely spectacular. At precisely 8 o'clock in the evening, we all gathered together in the media room, a luxurious space I had specifically designed for exactly moments like this one, with a screen that dominated an entire wall and custom acoustics that made every sound feel completely immersive. When the episode began its broadcast, my assembled guests erupted in enthusiastic cheers and applause. There was my home, showcased in all its magnificent glory. The camera slowly panning across the endless mountain vistas and lingering lovingly on all the architectural details I had so carefully and thoughtfully selected over months of planning. The charming host spoke knowledgeably about the property's fascinating history, its dramatic transformation from neglected estate to luxury showpiece, and the visionary developer who had brought the ambitious project to stunning fruition. Then came my personal interview segment, where I spoke passionately about my deep commitment to architectural preservation, my dedication to sustainable luxury development practices, and my fundamental belief that every truly great home should tell a meaningful story. I watched myself speaking confidently on that massive screen and barely recognized the poised, articulate woman I saw. She was everything I had worked so relentlessly to become, everything my parents had never once bothered to see or acknowledge. As the segment reached its conclusion, and my guests applauded enthusiastically again, I felt a strange, bittersweet mixture of hard-won triumph and lingering sorrow. This was the defining moment I had been building toward my entire adult life, and the 2 people who should have been proudest were sitting at home 4 hours away, buying groceries for a sister who could not be bothered to do anything meaningful for herself. After the successful viewing ended, and the party began to wind down naturally, I stepped out alone onto my expansive deck for a moment of quiet solitude. The mountains were completely shrouded in velvety darkness by then, but I could still feel their solid, enduring presence all around me like a protective embrace. I had built something truly remarkable here on this land, something meaningful that would long outlast all the petty disappointments and decades of familial neglect. But even as I acknowledged this important truth to myself, I could not shake the persistent question that had haunted me since early childhood. Why was I never enough for them? I pulled out my phone and posted a single red heart emoji to all my social media accounts, a gesture so small and cryptic it barely registered as communication. Then, I went back inside my beautiful home to thank my remaining guests for coming, to accept their warm congratulations with genuine gratitude, and to pretend convincingly that the painful absence of my family did not matter to me at all. But even as I smiled and hugged and made enthusiastic plans for future gatherings, I knew something had fundamentally and permanently changed inside me. The desperate little girl, who used to beg pathetically for scraps of parental attention, had finally grown into a woman who absolutely refused to beg any longer. And somewhere far away, in a modest house 4 hours east of here, my parents were about to discover exactly what their decades of casual indifference had truly cost them. The morning after the party, I woke to a phone absolutely flooded with notifications of every possible kind. Friends, professional acquaintances, and complete strangers had all seen the broadcast episode and were reaching out with enthusiastic congratulations and genuine amazement at my beautiful property. My email inbox contained serious inquiries from potential high-net-worth clients, formal requests for media interviews, and messages from other prominent developers wanting to explore collaboration opportunities. The overwhelmingly positive response was tremendous in the best possible way, a long overdue validation of everything I had worked so hard to build over 15 years. But the messages I noticed most acutely were the ones that were conspicuously absent. My parents had not called to congratulate me. My sister had not sent a single text. In the 12 hours since the episode had aired on national television, my immediate family had maintained the exact same radio silence that had always defined our dysfunctional relationship. Either they somehow had not seen the heavily promoted broadcast, which seemed highly unlikely given all the advance publicity, or they had seen it and simply did not care enough to reach out with any acknowledgement whatsoever. Both possibilities stung deeply, though I had trained myself over many years not to outwardly show how much their indifference affected me. I spent the entire morning productively fielding business calls and responding to the flood of messages, my professional life suddenly more demanding and exciting than it had ever been before. The national exposure from the HGTV special had elevated my industry profile significantly overnight, and lucrative opportunities were pouring in much faster than I could possibly process them all. By noon, I had already scheduled 3 separate meetings with potential major investors and received a preliminary offer to serve as lead consultant on a massive resort development project in Tennessee. All my years of hard work were finally paying off in ways I had only dared to dream about. Then my mother called. I stared at her name flashing on my screen for a long, uncertain moment before finally answering. Something deep in my gut told me this conversation would not be pleasant or congratulatory, but my curiosity ultimately won out over my well-developed sense of caution. "Grace, why did you not tell us about any of this?" Her voice was sharp and immediately accusatory, not warm or proud. "Tell you about what exactly?" "About the television show. About that enormous house. We had absolutely no idea about any of it. Do you have any idea how incredibly embarrassing it was to have our neighbor Dorothy call us first thing this morning and ask if we had seen our daughter Grace on HGTV last night? We did not even know what on earth she was talking about." I sat down slowly on my kitchen stool, carefully processing her revealing words. So this was their reaction to my success. Not pride in my accomplishments. Not heartfelt congratulations for my achievement. Pure embarrassment that they had been publicly caught not knowing anything about their own daughter's remarkably successful life. "I invited you to the housewarming party," I said, keeping my voice deliberately even and controlled. 3 full weeks in advance. I gave you plenty of notice. You chose not to come. You never told us it was going to be broadcast on television. The party itself was not on television, Mother. The house was featured, and you would have seen everything firsthand if you had simply bothered to show up as I asked. Heavy silence stretched uncomfortably between us across the phone line. I could hear my mother breathing on the other end, could almost physically feel her mentally searching for the angle that would somehow twist this situation into being entirely my fault rather than hers. "Your sister is very upset about all of this," she finally said, her voice carrying that familiar defensive edge. Of course Brooke was upset. Brooke was perpetually upset about something or other, and her feelings always took absolute precedence over mine in our family hierarchy. "Why exactly is Brooke upset?" "Because you have clearly been hiding your considerable success from the entire family. She feels deeply betrayed by your secrecy." I actually laughed out loud then, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me with its intensity. "She feels betrayed?" I have been sincerely inviting you both to every single significant event in my life for well over a decade now, and you have manufactured convenient excuses to skip every single one without fail. I eventually stopped telling you about my professional accomplishments because you never cared enough to genuinely celebrate any of them with me. If anyone in this family has legitimate standing to feel betrayed, it is definitely me. That is simply not fair, Grace. We have always fully supported you in everything. Then name one specific thing you have actually supported me in. Just one. Name one graduation ceremony you actually attended in person. One award ceremony you showed up for. One professional milestone you genuinely acknowledged with any enthusiasm. I will wait here patiently for your answer. More painful silence. The heavy weight of it was almost physically unbearable. You have always been so fiercely independent, my mother said finally, her voice noticeably smaller now. You never really seemed to need us for anything. I absolutely needed you. I needed you desperately. I just eventually stopped showing that need because every single time I reached out for connection, you chose Brooke over me instead. Yesterday was supposed to be genuinely important to me, and you casually skipped it because she needed groceries. She is 28 years old, Mother. She is fully capable of buying her own groceries like any other functional adult. Your sister has her own struggles that you do not understand. Her struggles are that she has never once had to genuinely try at anything because you do absolutely everything for her without question. That is not actually struggling, Mother. That is being completely enabled by parents who refuse to let her grow up and face natural consequences. I heard my mother take a sharp, offended breath, and for one brief moment, I genuinely thought she might actually hear and absorb what I was saying. Then her voice hardened again noticeably, slipping back into the familiar defensive tone that always emerged automatically whenever anyone dared to criticize precious Brooke. I do not appreciate being spoken to this way by my own daughter. Your father and I have always done our absolute best for both of you girls equally. If you deliberately chose to keep your entire life secret from us, that is entirely your own choice to make. But do not dare blame us for not knowing things you stubbornly refuse to share. The call ended shortly after that exchange, with no meaningful resolution and certainly no apology offered. I sat alone in my beautiful, expensive home, completely surrounded by tangible evidence of my substantial success, and felt the familiar deep ache of being chronically misunderstood by the people who should have known me best in the world. But something felt genuinely different this time. Usually, these frustrating conversations with my mother left me feeling emotionally drained and shamefully defeated, obsessively questioning whether I was somehow at fault for our terrible relationship. Today, I felt unexpected clarity instead. My mother had clearly revealed exactly where her true priorities permanently lay, and for once in my life, I was not going to twist myself into painful knots trying desperately to earn approval that would obviously never come. I did not call them back with an apology. I did not send a groveling text message trying to smooth things over. Instead, I focused entirely on my work, on the fulfilling life I had built completely without their help or support. If they genuinely wanted to be part of my world going forward, they certainly knew where to find me. But I was completely done chasing after people who consistently refused to meet me even halfway. 3 days later, my sister Brooke called my phone directly. She and I rarely spoke to each other without our parents mediating the conversation, our relationship having been defined almost entirely through their involvement since childhood. Her voice was immediately hostile and aggressive from her very first word. You think you are so much better than everyone else, do you not? Hello to you too, Brooke. Mom told me all about your fancy mansion, about you being featured on national television, about how you basically told her straight to her face that she was a terrible, neglectful parent. That is not even close to what I actually said. You made her cry, Grace. Our mother. Is that what you wanted to accomplish? To deliberately hurt our own mother and make her feel terrible about herself? I took a slow, deep breath, consciously reminding myself that engaging with Brooke's manufactured drama was never productive. She absolutely thrived on conflict. on positioning herself as the innocent victim in every conceivable scenario. I had watched her successfully deploy this manipulation tactic our entire lives together. I simply told her the honest truth about how I felt. If hearing the truth made her cry, maybe she should spend some time thinking carefully about why that is. God, you are so incredibly self-righteous. You always have been, ever since we were children. Just because you have money now does not automatically mean you are better than the rest of us. I have never once said I was better than anyone, Brooke. You did not have to actually say it out loud. You have been silently communicating it your entire life, with your fancy scholarships and your impressive career, and your holier-than-thou attitude about everything. Some of us are not as lucky as you, Grace. Some of us actually struggle with real problems. I closed my eyes tightly, fighting hard against the strong urge to list all the countless ways Brooke's so-called struggles were entirely self-inflicted. The decent jobs she had carelessly quit because she found them boring or beneath her. The promising relationships she had deliberately sabotaged because she refused to compromise or consider anyone else's needs. The years she had completely wasted living at home rent-free, letting our parents fund her entire existence while she contributed absolutely nothing of value to anyone. I was not lucky, I said quietly but firmly. I worked incredibly hard for everything I have. There is a significant difference between luck and effort. Whatever. Mom and Dad are both completely devastated by how you treated them. They think you must hate them to say such cruel things. I do not hate them. I am just exhausted from being their perpetual afterthought for 31 years. Brooke scoffed loudly with contempt. Everything is always about you, is it not? Your precious feelings, your important accomplishments, your big fancy successful life. Did you ever once stop to think about how all of this affects the rest of us? Now everyone in town knows you are wildly successful, and they are going to compare us unfavorably. Do you have any idea how that feels for me? For a long moment, I was genuinely speechless. The sheer audacity of her complaint was almost impressively self-centered, even for Brooke. She was upset because my success made her look bad by comparison. Not because she was proud of her own sister, not because she was happy for what I had achieved through hard work, but purely because it highlighted her own complete lack of achievement or ambition. Maybe, I said slowly and deliberately, instead of being upset that I succeeded, you could use it as motivation to finally do something meaningful with your own life. The phone line went dead. She had abruptly hung up on me. I set my phone down and stared out the window at the mountains for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. My mother was crying because I had told her the truth about our family dynamics. My sister was angry because my success made her look bad. And somewhere in all of this emotional chaos, I was apparently supposed to feel guilty for working hard and building something meaningful with my life. But I did not feel guilty at all. I felt something I had not expected to feel. I felt genuinely free. The confrontation had stripped away the very last illusions I had held about my family. They were never going to celebrate me. They were never going to acknowledge my accomplishments without finding some way to make everything about themselves. My mother would always prioritize Brooke above me. My sister would always bitterly resent my success. And my father, who had not spoken a single word to me through this entire painful situation, would remain the silent absence he had always been throughout my life. For years, I had told myself that if I just achieved enough, worked hard enough, became successful enough, they would finally see me, finally appreciate me, finally love me the way parents are supposed to love their children. But the television episode had proved conclusively what I should have accepted long ago. No amount of success would ever change their fundamental perception. In their eyes, I would always be the afterthought, the difficult daughter who did not seem to need them, the one who should be pathetically grateful for whatever scraps of attention occasionally came her way. The freedom in accepting this painful truth was both deeply liberating and quietly devastating. I no longer had to chase their approval, but I also had to let go of the hope that I might someday receive it. That hope had sustained me through years of disappointment. A tiny flame I had carefully protected, even as they repeatedly doused it with indifference. Now it was finally extinguished, and I was left standing in the darkness, trying to figure out who I was without it. 2 weeks after the episode aired, my life had returned to a semblance of normalcy. The initial overwhelming wave of attention had settled into a steady stream of excellent opportunities, and I was busier professionally than I had ever been before. But something continued to linger from those confrontations with my family, a restlessness I could not quite shake. I had drawn a clear line, and they had chosen not to cross it. The relationship was effectively over, unless something significant changed, and I knew the change would not come from me. Then I received an unexpected message. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister, reached out through social media. We had not spoken in years, our contact limited to occasional awkward holiday gatherings where she always seemed slightly uncomfortable around my parents. Her message was brief, but genuinely intriguing. Grace, I saw the HGTV episode. Congratulations on everything you have achieved. I have some important things I need to tell you about your family, things that might explain a lot about why things are the way they are. Can we meet? I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide whether I wanted to open this particular door. Patricia had always been kind to me, noticeably kinder than my own mother, though she kept her distance from family drama. If she was reaching out now, it meant something significant was on her mind. I agreed to meet her the following Saturday at a quiet cafe in Asheville. She made the 3-hour drive alone, arriving looking nervous but clearly determined to have this conversation. We settled into a corner booth away from other customers, and after some initial small talk about the weather and her drive, she took a deep breath. What I am about to tell you should have been told to you many years ago. I argued with your mother about it repeatedly, but she absolutely refused to discuss it. I have carried this guilt for so long now, and when I saw you on that television show, so incredibly successful, and so clearly alone in that success, I knew I could not stay silent anymore. My heart began to race. What are you talking about? Patricia looked down at her untouched coffee, gathering her thoughts carefully. Your mother and I had different fathers. You knew that already. But what you do not know is that your grandmother heavily favored me in exactly the same way your mother favors Brooke. I was the pretty one, the easy one, the one who got all the attention and praise. Your mother grew up feeling completely invisible and fundamentally unloved. She swore to herself that she would never do that to her own children. But she did exactly that to me. Yes, and the reason is complicated and painful. Patricia finally met my eyes directly. When you were born, you looked exactly like our mother. Same facial features, same expressions, same mannerisms as you grew older. Your mother loves you, Grace. I truly believe that. But she also sees her own mother in you, the woman who made her feel worthless and invisible, and she cannot seem to separate the two images in her mind. So she overcorrected with Brooke, determined to never make another child feel the way she felt growing up. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this revelation. My mother's neglect was not random or simply preferential. It was rooted in deep trauma, in a wound so profound she had transferred it onto her own innocent child without even realizing what she was doing. She punished me for looking like someone I never even knew, I finally said. Patricia nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I should have told you sooner. I should have fought harder when I saw what was happening. But your mother and I had our own unresolved issues, and I let that prevent me from doing the right thing. Why tell me now? Because I saw you on that television show, and I saw a woman who had succeeded despite everything stacked against her. But I also saw someone who looked lonely, someone who deserved to understand that she was never the problem. Your mother's inability to love you properly was never about you, Grace. It was always about her own broken heart. I did not know what to do with this information. Part of me felt genuine compassion for the wounded child my mother had once been. Part of me felt rage that she had inflicted her unresolved pain on me rather than seeking professional help. And part of me felt a strange sense of validation. I had not imagined the disparity. I had not been oversensitive or ungrateful. There had been a real reason for everything, even if that reason was deeply unfair. Patricia and I talked for hours. She filled in details about our family history, about patterns of favoritism that had repeated across generations. She apologized repeatedly for her years of silence, and I found myself forgiving her, even though I was not entirely sure I should. By the time we parted, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I drove home feeling different than I had that morning. The anger toward my family remained, but it was tempered now with understanding. My mother was not a villain. She was a damaged person who had damaged me in turn. That did not excuse her behavior, but it explained it. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. 6 months passed. The HGTV episode had launched my career into an entirely new stratosphere, and I was busier than I had ever been in my professional life. Exciting new development projects filled my calendar completely. Speaking engagements took me to conferences across the country, and my firm had expanded to include a talented team of 12 dedicated professionals. I had made the Forbes list of top real estate developers under 40, given interviews to major national publications, and established myself as a leading voice in sustainable luxury development. Success had arrived in abundance, and it showed no signs of slowing down. Through all of this remarkable growth, my parents remained conspicuously absent. After Patricia's revelation, I had half expected my mother to reach out, to acknowledge the painful patterns that had shaped our relationship. She never did. My sister continued posting bitter subtweets on social media, never naming me directly, but clearly referencing my success with thinly veiled resentment. My father remained a ghost, as invisible in my adult life as he had been throughout my childhood. I found unexpected peace in their silence. Without the constant, exhausting cycle of reaching out and being rejected, I could focus entirely on my own growth and happiness. Megan had been right all those years ago. Their inability to see my worth was a reflection of them, not me. I no longer needed their validation because I had found something more sustainable, my own belief in myself. The turning point came unexpectedly, as these things often do. A journalist named Caroline, writing a major piece on women in real estate development, requested an extensive interview. The article would appear in a prestigious national magazine, reaching an audience far larger than anything I had experienced before. I agreed, thinking it would be standard promotional material about my projects. But Caroline was interested in more than my professional achievements. She wanted to understand the person behind the success. During our conversation, I found myself sharing things I had never discussed publicly: the family dynamics that had shaped me, the isolation of growing up feeling invisible, the determination I had forged from that pain. I talked about the housewarming party in my parents' absence, about the HGTV episode they had missed, about the confrontations that followed. "It sounds like your success is a form of revenge," Caroline observed thoughtfully. I considered this. Not revenge exactly, more like proof. Proof that their dismissal of me was wrong. Proof that I was always capable of more than they believed. The article published 2 months later, and the response was overwhelming. Women from across the country reached out sharing similar stories, families that had favored one child over another, parents who had never acknowledged their achievements, siblings who resented their success. I had touched a nerve I had not known existed, and suddenly my story was bigger than just me. My parents saw the article. This time, they could not avoid it, because mutual acquaintances made absolutely sure they knew about it. The exposure was national, the story detailed and deeply personal. Everything I had kept private for years was now public record, and there was nowhere for them to hide from the truth of how they had treated me. My mother's call came 3 days after the article published. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up the phone. Her voice was different than it had ever been, smaller and more uncertain. "Grace, we need to talk about that article." "What about it?" "You made us look terrible to everyone. People in our town are talking. The neighbors, our church friends, everyone we know. They all read it. They all know what you said about us." I felt the old familiar pull, the instinct to apologize and smooth things over. But I pushed it firmly aside. Everything I said was completely true. You missed my housewarming for groceries. You never came to my graduations. You have always prioritized Brooke over me. I did not make you look terrible. I simply described what happened. "You do not understand how hard it was for me," my mother said, her voice cracking. "Raising 2 children, trying to do right by both of you. I know I made mistakes, but I tried my best. Your best was not good enough. And instead of acknowledging that, you are calling to complain about how the truth makes you look." Silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, "I am sorry." 2 words I had waited my entire life to hear. I let them hang in the air, feeling their weight, testing whether they changed anything. They did not. An apology after 31 years, prompted only by public embarrassment, was not the reconciliation I had once dreamed of. It was damage control. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "But I need you to understand something. I am not angry anymore. I do not hate you. But I also do not trust you. You have shown me throughout my entire life where your priorities lie, and they have never been with me. One apology, forced by public pressure, does not change that. What do you want me to do? I want you to think about whether you actually want a relationship with me, or whether you just want to repair your reputation. Because I am not interested in being your daughter only when it is convenient or makes you look good. If you want to be part of my life, you need to show up consistently, celebrate my successes, and treat me like I matter. If you cannot do that, then please leave me alone." I ended the call feeling something I had not expected. Not triumph, not sadness, but closure. I had said what I needed to say, set boundaries I should have set years ago, and left the decision in her hands. Whatever happened next was up to her. The fallout from the article continued for weeks. My sister posted a lengthy social media response calling me a liar and attention seeker, which only drew more attention to the original article and made her look petty and defensive. Friends of my parents reached out to me privately, confirming everything I had written and sharing their own observations about the family dynamic. The community I had grown up in was finally seeing what had been hidden in plain sight for decades. My mother attempted to rebuild the relationship, awkwardly at first. She sent birthday cards for the first time in years. She called occasionally with updates about her life, asked questions about mine. It was stilted and uncomfortable, but it was effort, and I acknowledged that even if I could not fully trust it. My father remained completely silent. Some people never change, and he seemed determined to prove this truth. Brooke oscillated between hostility and distant politeness, never quite apologizing, but occasionally commenting on my social media posts with neutral emojis. It was not the family reconciliation I had once fantasized about, but it was something. A beginning, perhaps, or at least an acknowledgement that the old patterns could not continue. The final moment of clarity came a year after the housewarming party at the grand opening of my newest project. I had developed a boutique mountain resort, a sustainable luxury destination that represented everything I believed about thoughtful design and environmental responsibility. The opening event was covered by regional media, attended by industry leaders, and recognized as a significant achievement in my field. My mother came. She drove 3 hours alone, walked into the event by herself, and found me in the crowd. She did not try to take credit or make the moment about herself. She simply hugged me, told me she was proud, and asked if I could give her a tour of the property. It was such a small gesture, but it was also everything I had ever wanted. Recognition, presence, effort. I showed her around, pointing out features I had designed, explaining my vision for the space. She listened, asked questions, and seemed genuinely interested. At the end of the tour, standing on a terrace overlooking the valley, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I wasted so many years," she said. "I cannot get them back, and I cannot fully explain why I did what I did. But I am here now, and I want to do better." I nodded, not quite ready to fully forgive, but willing to allow the possibility. Healing would take time, if it happened at all. But for the first time, I believed it might be possible. In the months that followed the article's publication, the consequences for my family continued to unfold in ways none of them had anticipated. Brooke, finally facing the reality that our parents could not shield her forever from public perception, enrolled in community college courses, and began working part-time at a local bakery. It was a small step, but it was movement, and I chose to view it as progress, even if it had come from embarrassment rather than genuine growth. My mother joined a therapy group for parents dealing with family estrangement, something I learned through my Aunt Patricia. The exposure had forced her to confront patterns she had spent decades avoiding, and while I did not know if she would truly change, the effort meant something. My father remained as distant as ever, but reports from family suggested he had become quieter, more withdrawn, as if the public accounting of his absence had finally registered somewhere in his consciousness. The community that had once seen only the polished surface of my family now understood the uncomfortable truth, and that truth carried consequences none of them had anticipated. Their reputation in our small hometown was permanently altered, their standing in their church community questioned, their carefully constructed image of the perfect family shattered by my honest words. The grocery run that had seemed so important that day now stood as a symbol of everything they had gotten wrong. As I stood on the deck of my mountain home one evening, watching the sun set behind the peaks in brilliant shades of orange and gold, I reflected on everything that had brought me to this moment. The revenge I had sought was never about destroying my family or exposing them for cruelty's sake. It was about being seen, finally and fully, by people who had looked past me my entire life. The HGTV episode, the article, the public acknowledgement of my success, these were not weapons I had wielded with malice. They were mirrors, reflecting back to my family exactly what they had refused to see for 31 years. I had built an extraordinary life, one filled with purpose, beauty, and people who genuinely loved me without conditions or reservations. And I had done it without their help, their support, or their belief in me. Looking back on this journey, I realized that the greatest revenge was not the public exposure or the uncomfortable reckoning my family had faced. It was the peace I had finally found within myself, the unshakable knowledge that I was worthy of love and recognition, regardless of whether they ever chose to provide it. My future stretched before me, bright with possibility and promise, and for the first time in my entire life, I was walking toward it without looking back, without hoping they would follow, and without needing their approval to feel complete.